my assistant, but I do have a sister. Do you have a sister? Just a brother?
He's an only child.
Oh, only
But that's
child.
his cousin.
And cousin.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you all again for being here, especially, tell me your name.
What's your name, baby?
Romel.
No, what's your name?
Romel. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah, Romel.
Yes. Romel, when he came last time, he's one of the, and you pick up on kids and things when you are around them. He just was like, let me give you a hug. I don't know this stranger, but let me give you a hug. And it's the sweetest thing, because one of the things as parents, when we think about where our kids are, what they're like, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are, is being able to pick up on their character and their character traits and things that make them tick or may trigger them, right? And so that's super, super important. And so I remember that, and he came up again this time and was like, tap, tap, tap. But he's, yes, you. Yes. To me, that says that he has a spirit that is welcoming of other people, right? And he did the tap, tap, tap. He didn't just come up and this. So tap, tap, tap tells me that he understands boundaries. So I can begin to, as an adult who's been in education, identify things about the kids that I'm in space with so that we can share our space together more equitably. And so that's I think one of the greatest tools that parents bring to the table is that you know your babies better than anyone, and you're just letting us borrow them. And in that time that we are borrowing them, it is a matter of making sure they come back home unbothered, like unchanged or untraumatized, or all of the things that sometimes happen at school, right? Bullying happens at school. Sometimes our babies don't feel like their voice is heard, and they might miss something. Like once this school year started, my 9-year-old who's in the 4th grade, so he's on the big kid side of the elementary yard now, right? And he's been waiting, he's had his older siblings at school with him, so he's been waiting to make it to what the big kids do. And so he said to me, I don't do the drop off in the morning because I'm not a morning person. I like to be up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning responding to emails, because I'm a night owl. So my husband is a morning person. Like, he could be up at 5-6 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, just don't bother me. And he takes the kids to school. I do all of the pickups. But in my husband's hurry of making sure they get to where they need to be, and we have 4 who need to be dropped off at 3 different schools in the morning. Elementary kid, and we now have this later start time, and so all of the things that you all are experiencing as a parent, I too am experiencing. And so my about to be 10-year-old going into double digits, he pulls me aside maybe about a month ago, and he said, Mom, some mornings I get there right in the nick of time that I'm not late, but I don't get breakfast. And so he has an option. Like, depending on the time that you leave, we have breakfast at home. Hot or cold, you have choices. But I understand you want to sit in the cafeteria and eat breakfast with your friends, and that's a comfort place for you. That's the way to get started. It's that social, emotional need to be connected with my peers, right? And so I had to have a conversation with him, like, okay, so did you tell Daddy? Because Mommy don't drop you. I want them to be able to advocate for themselves, and self-advocacy is so huge and important. But if they don't feel like any individual adult that's in their life, and I shouldn't say any, but particular individual adults in their lives aren't approachable enough to have that conversation, they won't. And 9 times out of 10, they'll allow for their needs to go unmet and unchecked if someone else doesn't come along and help them bring that out. And so I share that because this next part that we're going into, and I don't know why it's taking so long, but we're good still, is about making sure that as they are developing socio-emotionally, that you make sure that you're checking in. And our check-ins as adults, not just from a parent perspective, but from all of the other adults that are around them, whatever resources that they need to feel supported and loved and embraced and belonging in those spaces, that a couple of things are lifted. And voice is one of those things. And so I just always remind us as adults that their voices are only magnified and can be as loud as we give them permission to be. And they're looking for us to give them that permission. And when kids don't, it's because somebody didn't give them permission to be loud, bold, sometimes uncontrollable, all of the things that is what kids are, right? It's the immaturity of and lack of experience sometimes that says, I don't know when I shouldn't be loud and obnoxious, right? And so we just show up in that unrelinquished amount of energy. Sometimes I wish that we as adults took ourselves back to our childhood, times when we felt that we didn't have that thing that was reeling us in. Oh, you can only do this then, reel it back in. And, oh, you have to show up like this, reel it back in. Oh, you have to be professional. Professional looks like this, right? Reel those norms in that we've been conditioned to believe has to be the end all be all. Because we know that it doesn't have to be the end all be all. In order for our authentic selves to show up in spaces and be appreciated and valued for our authentic selves, it starts at a young age. And so that's where I kind of want to go with this next session is that social emotional piece, but how are we helping our babies amplify the voice so that they feel comfortable when they notice something's off, that they can get the help that they need. If they can't self-regulate, right? Because self-advocacy is extremely important, but if they can't do that for themselves, that they have people in their corners that will help them self-regulate. And so that's super important. Okay, I think it is sent, allow, send, and sent. And so I'm just going to keep going off of this until we get it over here, and then it'll be on the screen. With that being said, let's check in really quickly. And Mom, now, tell me your name.
My name is Sabina.
Sabina, I love that. Thank you. And Mom?
Karen.
Karen. Sabina and Karen, think about the last time that we were together. And I asked you to think about that time when you were younger, right? Because we did a little activity where we closed our eyes and we thought about a time where we were kind of silenced. Silenced in a way that we didn't feel like our voice was important. And maybe it wasn't that somebody told you that you couldn't say something, but it was a feeling. It was an observation. It was just the way that it was. Maybe it was cultural, because there are certain cultures, and we have to also recognize that there are cultures where there are gender norms, right? And so a girl is supposed to be this, a boy is supposed to be that, right? And there's no recognition even of in between. And then there are other cultures. I love to refer to indigenous Hawaiian cultures and indigenous African culture, West African cultures to be specific, because they both have, I've done a lot of study around people who are in the middle, right? And so both have this place. There is a reckoning, a recognition of people who identify in the middle, right? And so that in the middle could be several things. But to make children fall into two categories that might not be who they feel is a comfort to who they are, we have to let go. We have to let go because it's theirs to develop for them, if that makes sense. And so what, if any, were some things that you thought about as some takeaways and reflecting on your own childhood that may have been silenced when you were younger? Either of you, it doesn't.
So I consider I identify as Mexican American.
Uh-huh.
My mom was a Mexican immigrant from the state of Michoacan, and it was very what we call machismo. I had an older brother. I felt like he had more freedom to go out and about, and my mom would always tell me, "No, you can't. Look, it is." She would say, "You're a girl. More things can happen to you. You're supposed to stay home. He's a guy. things like that, and then the topic around mental health as well. I remember I went through a phase in middle school and in high school where I kind of felt very I had depressive episodes. And my mom, like, she didn't understand. It's not that it's not something that and she grew up. I've tried to talk to her about it,
Yeah.
and she just says, just get more motivated. It's just, that mentality that she has around things like that. And it's something I'm always, I try to be involved with my son as much. And then my mom wasn't very affectionate much. So my son is the complete opposite. I'm every day I try to be more I try to be more emotional, show more emotion, be more affectionate. Because it's sometimes I feel guilty because I feel like I'm not affectionate enough. Oh my God, he goes up to you and he taps you, and I'm learning to be more accepting, in that sense. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Sabina.
Yes,
thank you for sharing. Anything you want to share, Karen?
I guess I just think about like myself as a little kid and like not being heard. I feel like mainly my own personality was my hindrance to being heard. I was just very, very shy and sensitive, and that I think that the adults around me, they were for the most part open to hearing my needs, but I think I didn't know how to express that.
Yeah. And so that both of those, right? So we got some cultural norms, and then we have some internal things that I'm hearing. And I'm sure that the rest of us as adults can share things from, childhood and be like, yeah, that happened. Or I can relate, or I know somebody right? So it's the outside circle that impacts us, the individual, right? So we have some social cultural norms that are impacting us as an individual. And then it's our internal that impacts us as the individual. And that sounds like shy. When I hear shy, you're probably, and I don't want to speak for, but you articulate well. You don't seem like, oh my God, I can't, and I don't want to, I don't see that. So it's not a matter of I can't, it's a matter of, one, do I feel safe? Is this, right? So introvert versus extrovert is a thing. And I tell people all the time, I really would like to be the introvert that I really am. And Elton is a family member, and he's frowning because he's saying like, she ain't no introvert. I have managed to have extroverted tendencies, but I really like to default back. If I could sit in the corner and just observe, that's what I'm going to do. That's my preference. That's my comfort zone. I could be in my own little world, singing a song in my head, all by myself, and just don't bother my bubble, which are key characteristics of an introvert. But because I've managed to be social and move around in spaces and articulate and use cues and clues when communicating, some people think that I'm an extrovert. So I say relationships that matter, and they start at home, but they trickle over into the classroom and on the playground. And so I'm hoping that this plays for us and everything. There's this grounding, as I shared last time, where I try to acknowledge not only just the land that we are on and the people who are stewarded the land and contributed to where we are as a people, but just knowing that there are some things that we stand on culturally that we just should give reverence to. And so let's see if we play for me. No, it's not playing for me. Maybe it has to have permission to or enable. No.
There's no link.
And so let me just give you a definition of grounding. Grounding, by definition, is our bodies have electrons and neutrons and energy and things. So does the ground. And so when we put our bare feet into the dirt, there is supposedly this magnetic current that connects us to Mother Earth and all of the things, right? With that being said, it's also a recognition that we don't have control of everything. And so grounding in the sense of no. Okay. So So maybe we can pull it up on,
Is it the,
Can you come out of present mode? It might be in there.
the,
Is it from YouTube?
it is.
You can probably go directly to the
Yeah, that's
YouTube
what I was
website.
thinking.
I would think that is it.
But it
right
should.
there? Sometimes you can't get it. You might be able to click on it.
I think I put in something like,
land
yeah. So, grounding, making sure that we're connected to the things that we can't necessarily control, but we are connected to nonetheless. And I want to say it's the second one.
Here?
Yep, that one. Perfect.
What is land acknowledgement?
No, this is the one that's the description. Go back 1 second because I saw it on the left-hand side. It's the second one there with the 2.20.
Okay.
Yep, that one.
What is land acknowledgement?
I like it.
Those of us that are continuing our oral history are blessed. What we shared, that was told from way back.
We were part of the ecosystem. We were not masters of it.
You know, after we grow up from our biological mothers, the earth becomes our caregiver. Everything that we need is there.
We were raised to believe that everything has a spirit, and that everything around us is alive and has a purpose.
The spirit of the land and our spirit. You can't separate land and people.
In Treaty 7 territory, I'm accepted, I'm something, and I'm with my people.
We honor our ancestors by acknowledging Treaty 7 territory. We acknowledge the Treaty 7 nations, the Piikani First Nation, the Siksika First Nation, the Gana First Nation, Stony Nakota First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the home of Métis Region number 3.
And so just a simple, like, where are we connected to? Where do our values and morals come from, right? Those things that have been instilled in us from a small child that we begin to recognize that I want to hold on to as I become an adult, is the acknowledgement. And so don't worry about this one. It's very similar in the sense of it connects not just the land, but the water, right? And so when we connect to those three things, humans, land, water, all represent life. I just put this slide in here again because, of course, this is a safe and brave space, and reiterating some of the things where we can be vulnerable, that this is a no judgment zone, questions are welcome, we want to inspire growth, embrace change, and that we are all in different places. Like, that is, you know, not just as far as younger and older, right, but all in different spaces. And so last time we were together, we kind of had a background of where are we when it comes to understanding mental health, the epigenetics around trauma. There are no deficits. I say that we live in a very resource-rich, we just need to be more creative and not let the norm prescribe how we're supposed to do school. Like, we can do some things that are amazing, and I have no doubt in meeting the principal here, knowing Elton, and the things that are going on within the Twin Rivers Unified School District, that there are some things that are outside of the box that are going on to inspire the resource richness. What are social emotional health and learning? Having just some shared language and values around what this means to, one, recognize it, and then articulate it. because that's super important. But and then just tips and tricks. I always say parents being present versus presence is super, super important. My husband and I have this debate. I just posted on my Facebook page the other day. I said, fathers parent girls in a way that is about doting. Like, that's my baby girl, and oh, she's so pretty. Mothers raise boys in a way that is almost coddling. Like, oh, my son, and yes, you're gonna be so strong and you can do no wrong. I'm the mother of 6 boys, so I don't know what it means to parent a girl. So I think that they get all of the, how to cook, clean. You're going to do the things that typically a father would be like, oh, you don't have to do that, right? And I'm saying these in general terms. This is not by no means like this is how it is. Culturally speaking, from an American perspective, typically men offer the physical to male and female, and those children pick up whatever it is that feels good to them. And women are the more nurturing, soft, tender, let's talk about it. And that's, again, it's not the blanket of everyone. But with that being said, we have to recognize what our strengths and weaknesses. And I think the point of the post that I made was that oftentimes what gets forgotten is that all children are not growing up in a 2-parent household. All children are not growing up in a male-female household. And so we forget where these other things might come from, right? Because they're going to bring it home anyway. And so what I wanted to talk about today is, which we've already kind of done, when were you silenced? That was our review. Expanding on this understanding of social emotional learning so that we can build better bridges as you come into a school atmosphere, as you go into a school board meeting, as you participate in and volunteer going on a field trip. Where those bridges that are being built, right? What support mechanisms that students need and some guiding principles behind how do we support students is extremely important from a parent perspective. Again, I cannot reiterate more. I'm going to say it a lot every time that we're together. Parents are that untapped resource that is it's the bucket of gold at the end of a rainbow. And I just don't think that they get tapped into enough. It is the richest place that we can find resource. Ways to engage, what to watch out for, and then questions. And going back to that presence versus present again. So I talked about this slide last time because it's super important that we understand that children who are already a part of what is deemed marginalized, disenfranchised, not the norm, they have some barriers that they face even from a young age. And so as we reviewed this chart last time, babies at age 3 are looking at faces and matching the similarity. I said 3 months are matching similarities. And the most obvious similarity that they begin to pick up on is skin complexion. As they progress and move to age 5 or 7, they are dramatically showing attitudes towards who they are as individuals and choosing individuals that they feel comfort with based on what they look like, what home looks like, right? But in between here, I say about this stage, and I will send you this slide if you want to send this out, because the important piece that comes out of this is there's some research behind every one of these data points, right? And I always like to refer back. This isn't Sonia saying this. Sonia just didn't spend 17 and a half years in the classroom and say, oh, all of my kids taught me this. This is something that I didn't have to, I just was like, yes, this makes sense because I remember that child. This makes sense because I look at my own children, right? And so here at about age 5, Black and Latinx children in particular, research is saying they show no preference towards their own groups compared to white children, right? No preference towards. That means that they are more willing to go out and explore with anyone. The unfortunate cultural norm that we live in for our white counterpart children is that they sometimes feel closed off and reserved, and they don't have the permission to go outside of that norm, if that makes sense. So more minority students are able to say, I don't care what you look like, but for whatever reason, and I want to do some more study and research around that. Why? Because it goes on to say white children at this age remain strongly biased in favor of what they look like, right? So when does that happen for kids, right? That's when we need to begin to flush out and recognize. Again, everyone isn't at the same stage at the same time, okay? And two things can be right at the same time as well. But here's some other learning that can go along with these principles that I always lean on. Teaching for tolerance, especially for you all if you're having professional development and things of that nature. I love the things that Teaching for Tolerance does. Raising race-conscious children is extremely important. And this Fortified Community Health here in California has given me a lot of just tools and nuggets and stuff that I'm just like, oh, let me go to that and get some, on their website, you can put in any topic and lots of things come up. When I was teaching in San Francisco, I was one of the ambassador teachers with Teaching for Tolerance, which that's probably why it's always one of my go-tos. Is like, oh, I know that they have something important to share. Sharing this one again as well, because again, us not all being in the same place at the same time also means that we don't know the levels of trauma that each of us have experienced or not, right? And so generational trauma impacts students in different ways. But what I like about this diagram here, it's telling us that we as individuals recognize when stress is coming in and how do we deal with it. Our bodies are trained from the time we're in the womb to begin to recognize, based on the experiences of our foreparents, generations back, how to deal with stress, which is translated to trauma, right? And so these are complex terms for me because I'm not a scientist. By no stretch of the imagination am I going to say, oh, the Adderall cortex is doing X, Y. I'm not going to do that because that's not my area of expertise. But I can tell you that when I as an individual, based on the experiences in my 51 years of walking this earth, that thing triggered something because I remember when I was this age and it's making a connection in my brain. It doesn't change my DNA and who I want to be. It just tells me I have to protect myself. And we all have that. Okay? And so I put here on the side that trauma can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes. It doesn't change the DNA, but it leaves a chemical mark. And that's what's being passed down from generation to generation. It's not that we can't have something different or act different. For example, using the example of the machismo cultural norm, right? And it's not just in the Latinx, community. Other cultures have this, they call it something else, right? But that thing of being macho for men and that girls are supposed to be soft and dainty. What's the nursery rhyme? Boys are made of boogers and snot, and y'all don't know that?
No.
Girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and boys are made of
the Powerpuff Girls. I remember that
sugar and spice and everything nice.
Yeah,
That's girls, and the boys are made of boogers and snot.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know that one.
Bugs and spiders, boogers and snot, and everything not.
I think that's
Last
what you
time,
want.
my mommy.
I love my boys, and we have fun, and we all get rough. But that genetic thing that's being impacted on our genes is the chemicals in our bodies. How do we respond to it? So social emotional learning, this is something of a review as well. Where are we with understanding our self-awareness? Who are we in this time and space? Who are we in this time and space, and how are we managing us in this time and space, right? They go hand in hand with one another. Are we able, as we are aware of who we are in this time and space and how we manage ourselves in this time and space, what decisions can we make about management and who we are? Take it further. Now I'm aware of who I am. I'm able to manage who I am. I can make some decisions. take it a step further, and how do I relate to others? That relation to others is that social awareness piece that some kids don't get naturally. They have to grow into it. Like the pitch and tone of my voice, right? For some people, I had a student once upon a time, and loud sounds. She was like, Miss Lewis, can you talk lower? And I just was like, I'm talking normal. She said, no, you are so loud. I'll be like, oh, okay. I'm gonna go over here on this side of the room, on the opposite side of you, so that I can articulate and pitch so that everyone can, but that wasn't it was that she was triggered by something that she needed from me, and I needed to listen to that. So I had to be socially aware of all of these things being in play with one another. And so that's in our communities, family and caregivers, schools, classrooms impact those things. And this is from more of a broader academic, educational perspective. This just takes it a step further, and this is a little bit blurry, but it takes it from social, emotional, what motivates us, right? Because everyone's motivation is different. How do we positively feel like we are connected to the people that are around us? Super important. Being able to manage and make decisions. So this takes this chart and just expands it a little bit more, right? We're managing behaviors. Like, is that good for me? Is that bad for me? Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this, right? And then when conflict arises, because conflict always arises, because everyone is not the same. And because we're not the same, it's okay. And getting kids to understand and appreciate that everyone not being the same is okay sometimes is incredibly hard, right? And this is a question that's open to anyone, but have you as parents recognized that when it's hard for a kid to be like, oh, that's not for me, or that's different? He's good. Yeah. What did that, how, you give us an example of how that might play out.
First thing that comes to my mind is my boys. I have two boys. One's 7 and one's 4. And trying to explain to my 7-year-old that his brother has a 4-year-old brain and he thinks differently. And like he's not gonna think the same way about this, or he's not gonna want to play the game the same way that you do.
Right. It's the and sometimes it's the little things like, don't put someone down because you think that they're as smart as you. Right? So especially with siblings who are of a different age, and at least in my household with my boys, they use words that like irk me, and I'll call a name from the other room and I'll be like, why did you just say that? I heard that. Right? Because they're playing video games and they're doing what boys do, talking crap to each other, and I'm like, why did you call your brother that name? From the other room. And they're like, she heard that? I hear them say the comments after I say something that I've heard them say. And it's like, my 12-year-old is so notorious. We call him, the biggest hypocrite in the house, because he'll complain about this thing and then he's guilty of doing that very thing that he complained about. Such a hypocrite. But he will tell his brother it's a game that they play, and sometimes it's all 5 of them on a game at one time, and he'll be like, why are you 6 spamming? If that's the only move you can do is to 6 spam, and I'm like, it's the move that kills you. Figure out how to stop him from doing that move that kills you, because I need you to stop saying all you can do is 6 spam, because that's what he yells through the game. But that's how we deal with conflict, is figuring out who are our allies and who are not. Who are we alike and not alike, right? And then giving people permission to be different from us. That's a part of conflict and resolving it. But we also have to understand, with conflict, give ourselves permission to be emotional. Anger is an emotion, right? Jealousy is an emotion. Those things that are negative emotions, allowing them to be a part of who our children are so that they identify them and understand that this is a present and I might need to have a moment, right? But not being so super hard on them for being humans, because we all were once upon a time there. And so taking that a step further, expanding the definition. So I want to go into this little piece about what does it mean for students to be successful. Any questions up to this point? Okay. Things to help our students be successful. We want them, and we have these ideas in our head. Like, if I were to ask any of us, and anyone can chime in, what do you or have you thought about your definition of what it means for your kids to be successful? What does that look like for you? Put a couple words to it, 3 words at least, and any of us.
I want my kids to be happy.
Happy.
Happy and finding something that he's really passionate about.
Passion.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mommy,
Anything else?
Think of relationships too.
Relationships. Absolutely. Success doesn't, I tell my kids, and I think that folks who are of a certain age and a certain generation, they lean on success looks like the prescribed American dream, right? Go and get married, have 2 kids, 2.5 kids. I can remember that being a thing. I was like, how can we have 2.5 kids? You halfway pregnant or you're not? Like, that's not a thing. Have a career, go to college. You know, those were kind of the things that were poured into me as a child. But I'm a child, you know, raised by kids who are, by parents, not by kids, by parents who were baby boomers and whose parents came out of the Great Depression. Right? So I'm aging myself. The 70s were a thing where, one, we want to be free and hippie love and all that kind of stuff. But that also came out of a period of hard times for a lot of people in this country. And so my parents instilled, go to college, get married, have children, find that career. It doesn't matter what you make, but find that thing that you are passionate about. As I got older, I recognized that that prescription, the norm, didn't fit all people. And so I'm trying to instill in my children and in the students that I have come in contact with during my career, it is like, let's find those things that make you happy and passionate. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if you could become a millionaire off of that thing that makes you happy? That's like the ultimate. But if you don't become a millionaire, isn't that okay too? As long as the happiness, the fulfillment, the ability to take care of oneself is there. And so when we think about student success, I always think about, from an academic perspective, are we meeting the needs of a strong academic foundation? Right? We know that there are some earmarked pieces of time in a child's matriculation through the school system that we are saying to ourselves, they got to be doing this by this age. You know, you take your kid in for a doctor, their little annual checkup, and the doctor says they should be, you know, babies should be holding their head up at this age, or they should be crawling on their forearm. Those things, we have that embedded in the education system as well. I particularly, for elementary, the big thing for me is 4th grade, right? 4th grade is that big change, like, especially when it comes to academic responsibility on the student part. Like, the teacher's not holding our hands anymore as much. I shouldn't say anymore, but as much. And consequences shift at 4th grade, right? And so something that a first, second, or third grader might do might be seen as, oh, they didn't know better. But for a 4th, 5th, or 6th grader, you know better, and the consequences are different, right? So what does that strong academic foundation look like? What also, super equally as important, is that social-emotional competencies. Those things that we already just talked about with our social-emotional awareness, management, relation, all of those things. Can we regulate? Are we able to persevere? And then the third piece that's extremely important, and it's just recognizing the culture and the climate of the school. Who's here to lead? And in that leadership, does that leadership recognize that kids are in different spaces and time, and what do they bring to the table? And some of that stuff that they bring to the table is ugly and ucky and just something that we wish that they never had to experience. And what are we doing about it? That all comes into the culture and climate of the school. My third year of teaching, I was teaching at a high school in San Francisco, and no, this is my second year of teaching. I was in my master's and teaching credential program at San Francisco State, and I had finally, my first job in San Francisco Unified School District was at a continuation school, and it was a night school, and it was almost like a nightmare because I was like, oh my God, I have to teach from like 4 o'clock in the afternoon to like 9 o'clock at night. It was like, and I'm leaving this place not on my side of town at night, pitch dark. And I had girls in my class who were leaving this school at night, and they had to ride public transportation. And my worry every night was like, I can't wait to get out this school because I just don't like the image of seeing those babies have to get on public transportation to try to get home by 10, and all the elements, right, that we know come with a big city, that being their exposure. And so that was my huge worry. So year 2, I go into a traditional high school, McAteer at the time, and it was an okay, school, but I had a young lady who was in foster care, and she pulled me aside one day, and she was like, I was Miss Williams back then, and she said, Miss Williams, I am so hungry. And I'm like, why don't you eat? What is the problem? And on the outside, she was a straight A student, well-mannered. Everything that I would want for a student was in this young lady. I would have never imagined that she had the background that she had, but she masked it well. She was like, I have to do this to get out of the situation. And I just felt honored that one, she trusted me to share this with, but the way that the introduction of the conversation was, Miss Williams, I'm hungry. And so I told her from any time that she's hungry, if it's between passing periods, after school, if you know that ain't nothing at home, I have a drawer in my filing cabinet that's always gonna have some food in it. Come in at any time and take what you need. I said, you don't need to tell anybody, this is between you and I. And then later I found that there were other students that were like that I was able to just be like, I got something in that bottom drawer. If you ever need something, just do what you need to do inconspicuously to get what you need, do that. And I also gave them permission, which I probably shouldn't have. I had a little sticky pad in there and a pen, and I'd be like, if it's something that you really, really want, put your wish list in. It was and then when I would go shopping for groceries, I had this little sticky note. This child think that I'm gonna get this, okay? But and I would treat them to candy. Sometimes it'll be candy in there. But in my mind, it was like, I want to be not. I don't think it was a yearning or desire to be the cool teacher, but I wanted to be relatable enough that they feel comfortable enough to come to me for those things, because it was those things that opened the door for other things to be solved. Like grandma, for her, was really older and not in a state of mind to take care of she and her 2 younger siblings, and that was the reality. But mom was in jail, and where were they going to go? And so she took on this role and responsibility of making sure that they had stuff. And then she would put her little sticky notes would always be very like cheap. I'm just gonna say cheap things like, Miss Willis, can you buy like a 6-pack of noodles? And I'm gonna take the whole 6-pack of noodles home. And I'll be like, I got it. I get it, right? And so that's what little things like that. But paying attention to social emotional, strong academic foundation. But we also have to think about success in life. What are they pursuing? Because as they mature, kindergarten, my mom had this book she bought for my sister and I. And I don't know if they even, because I didn't do it for my kids, but she bought this book, and it had these little folders, these little envelopes that was in the book. And every year you can put your picture on the outside of the little folder, and then all your report cards in there, and then it's a space for the kid to write out my teacher was, this was my favorite subject. And every year, so I go back every once in a while and I look at mine, right? And I'll be like, oh, you were cute in the 3rd grade. But you know, I digress. In 3rd grade, I wanted to be an airline stewardess. That's what I wanted to do, right? In the 5th grade, I wanted to be president of the United States. How different, right? In the 7th grade, in that very same book, I wanted to own my own business because at that time I was like, I'm pissed off at the whole world. And you know, what do 12 and 13-year-olds do? They get mature enough to a space where they're just like, you know, I'm gonna do what I want to do. And that's where I was. And so I was like, I'm gonna own my own business. But every year I noticed that there was something different I wanted to do. Where are they going? Are they going in the direction of passion? Are they going to be happy when they make the decisions for themselves? This comes off of the California Department of Education's website. But again, it's the whole child. It's where is there a commitment to equity? Where can we build capacity in our school spaces so that parents even feel like they can approach and come onto our campuses? How are we partnering with our families and communities? Where can learning and improvements go forward? Always on the front of. So these are my just things that I think about when I think about the parents who, over my time in the classroom, that were really, really good at being engaged. And it didn't mean that they were the stay-at-home mom who just didn't have time to go out and do anything else. And so they became the classroom mom. It wasn't just those kind of moms or dads, right? I always say have some kind of daily conversation with your babies. Short, sweet, to the point. Let them guide that conversation. For me in my household, it's when I drop them off, we have an affirmation in the morning. I told you the story about my now 17-year-old getting ready to graduate from high school. When he was in kindergarten, he could not pronounce the word mediocre. He said meat and okra. And so he would get out the car because the affirmation was the same for everyone. We are not mediocre. Always do your best. That was our affirmation every time they got out the car. And 3 of them were in elementary at the same time. And he'd get out, he'd be like, Mom, I am not meat and okra. And so still to this day, his older brothers tease him and call him meat and okra. What you want for dinner? When they tease around our house, what you want for dinner? They say Ahmad wants meat and okra. So you can tease Ahmad and tell him, oh, you remember you like meat and okra. But that was our daily affirmations. Conversely, when I picked them up in the afternoon, it's more than how was your day? Because kids are going to tell you it's fine. And then, of course, I'm not going to accept fine. Like, what does fine look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Expand that conversation. Start each school year off or term, depending on the level that they are at elementary each school year. They have the same teacher all year long, hopefully, to build that continuity. But with either an email, phone call, written letter, your choice. For me, I sent an email and it sounds a little bit like this, and I am not being facetious or my name is Sonia Williams Lewis, and I am the parent of, and at the elementary level, some of these teachers have had my kids multiple times, so they're expecting to get this. They're like, I got a Lewis kid, right? My kids are encouraged to stand in their truth, be vocal about who they are and what their needs are. And please don't make my kids stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. That's how I start off every email at the beginning of each school year.
She's not lying.
And I had a teacher once who said, can you explain this thing about the Pledge of Allegiance? I said, well, do you really want me to explain that? Because when I was 7 years old, I went to school one day and I said, I ain't saying the Pledge of Allegiance because in my community, I grew up in the Bay Area. So I got to give a little background, right? I grew up in the Bay Area during the 70s, and the Black Panther Party was very prevalent, but at the same time, I go back to that chart of childhood development. At a young age, I saw and recognized the differences between people and race. And so I said to my 2nd grade teacher, Miss Bill, you bless her heart, it's not liberty and justice for Black people. And she looked at me and said, look at here, Miss Williams, either you're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance or you're not going to be in my class, but we're going to start with giving you a piece of chalk and write on the board until you say the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance is the American way. And instead, I would, when she would come back from recess, and I hadn't written on the board, the Pledge of Allegiance is the American way, I would be practicing my cursive. I got an A in cursive, like, in the second grade, because I had older siblings and cousins and stuff, and I would just, I love cursive. I just like the flow. So I would be on there practicing my S's, and she would come back, and you could see that she was just infuriated. It was palpable. I felt the heat off of her body. And I reveled in it. I loved it. I was like, here she comes. I did long division before we were supposed to know long division, and she'd be like, this little girl, if she don't go. And I was in a gate and gifted class, and she was like, what am I doing with this kid? So I start off with every email because they don't have to. But I also share in that email, the best way to reach me is don't email me. I'm sending you this email, but don't email me because my email is over 10,000 and I'm not going into that scary place because it is a dungeon that I refuse to go into. Please text or call me, but do not let my baby fall between the cracks. Yes, I know you are familiar with the Lewis kids, but all of them are not the same. I have a student right now who is a 7th grader, and he has a teacher who has had 4 of his siblings. And she called me, I shared this a little bit last time. She called and she said, Idris is very different from your other boys. I'm like, I know, right? And I'm so glad that you have seen, because he is so different. And so Idris is my firecracker. He's like, we're going to party, we're going to have fun as we learn. But we won't know these things if we don't know our kids. So introduce yourself. List any expectations that you might have. Identify what you believe to be your child, son or daughter's strengths and weaknesses. What is the best way to reach you? Because again, some teachers might say, oh, well, I emailed you, right? And I'm gonna be like, I didn't get that email. And legitimately, in my defense, I didn't, because I didn't go in that email. And I used to not want to give the school and the teachers and stuff my work email, because then I feel like my work email is going to be inundated like my personal email. So I try to, but I can't juggle the personal one anymore. I just don't go there. Please call or text me. I'm waiting right now as a parent on a phone call back from my 4th grader's teacher. My 4th grader came while I was away last week. He got a little note. So every Friday they get a little thing. What's their progress for the week? Did they do all their assignments? Parents supposed to sign in, bring it back to school on Monday, yada, yada. And all of his are typically good. So on this one, I get back and I'm like, I'm jet lagged. Monday morning, he says, oh, Mom, I need you to sign my little thing. So I sign it, but I see that it's one of the discipline papers that's behind it. And the discipline paper was, they had a fire drill, and he and a group of other boys were talking during the fire drill while instruction was being given. I said, son, it's important to listen during the fire. If it's a real fire, you're going to need to know what you're doing, and mommy needs you not to get burnt up in the fire. So you got to put your listening ears on. He said, but I wasn't talking. I said, well, did you tell your teacher that you weren't talking? He said, yes, I did, but she didn't believe me. I said, do you believe that she didn't believe you, or do you think that, so we had to flush that out just a little bit. So now I'm awake, right? As I'm jet lagged, I'm like sitting up in the bed rather than laying on the side of the bed, signing it, the way that sometimes us mommies and daddies have to do, because we're trying to make sure that they're on time. And so I said to him, he said, no, I think that she doesn't believe me. And he said, this isn't the first time that I didn't feel like I wasn't believed. So then he knows who his mommy is. And he immediately, when he said that, he began to stop himself. Because I turned the paper over and I wrote this long note to his teacher. Please call me within the next 2 days. Today is Thursday. That was Monday. And I have yet to receive a phone call. So tomorrow, because I think that I gave grace was giving you 2 days to call me back. As a parent who's already given you, at the beginning of the school year, an email that says, here's my expectations. This is the best way to contact me. And please don't let my baby slip through the crack. Because if you let my baby slip through the crack, and I'm made aware after the crack is closed that he has X, Y, and Z kind of grade and or behavior, the responsibility of that is on the school, not what we get brought home as parents. And so we have to be, as parents, strong enough to say, this is what I need and here are my expectations. So tomorrow, I will be on the phone first thing in the morning, leaving her a voicemail. I wrote you a note because he came home yesterday and he said, "Did my teacher call you?" And I said, "Nope." He said, "Give her one more day." And so only because he asked me to give her one more day, am I giving her one more day. But if you don't do this, this sets up boundaries. This sets up like it's giving the educational system and those who are trusted to borrow your babies an opportunity to connect with you. Take time to make time. Parent-teacher conferences are important, but they are not the only touch points that you can have at your kid's school. These things are incredibly important because you are messaging something to your babies when you go to the school in the nighttime, right? In the evening. Their education is important. But parent-teacher conferences, field trips, classroom observations, volunteering to be that at our schools, it's a lot. PTA, it's the parent docent, it's the art, can you come in and do this? And we try our hardest. I've sent my kids to schools where it was required parent participation. And so I've volunteered to do things even in my busy life and schedule running a business where I couldn't be there physically. But I had a teacher one year who was like, "Can I send you home with a stack of papers just to grade on a Friday?" And I was absolutely, if that's going to give me my 2 hours of volunteer time to the school, I'm here for it. Know your scholars, friends, associates, and foes. Not enemies, but foes. Those kids that our kids don't like, we need to know them and know them by name. So important because when we don't and an issue arises, we need to be able to identify where those issues are coming from. And that's just not from their peers. It's also from like knowing who the yard monitor is, knowing the ins and outs, and knowing that a kid might be in a different grade or a different class, that kind of thing. And so when our babies don't know that they have permission to even ask about the things other than the 32 that might be in the classroom that they're in, they sometimes just get stuck with those, focusing on those 32. Connect with your scholars through their favorite subject. Share with them what your favorite subject is. Like when I was in, and this is what I like to do, kind of thing, and make some connections. Encourage them, but also reward them. Any auxiliary groups, PTA, or other programs that are on campus, make connections with them. Find learning opportunities at home. This is one of the biggest ones that I tell parents, like if you're cooking in the kitchen and you got to measure something, let them do that kind of stuff. You'd be surprised. This year, now, you already know that I'm a little bit edgy as far as my thought process is and not the norm, but I don't call Thanksgiving Thanksgiving. I call it Thanks-taking because of the history that's associated with our taking the land and taking people. So I call it Thanks-taking, right? And so this year for Thanks-taking, Omega, he's going to be 10. He made his favorite, which is green beans. But he doesn't just get to, for a big meal like that's a family meal, to just open up cans and dump them into a pot. It's not that kind of party. So we're talking about chopping up and snapping peas and cutting up the potatoes that go into the green beans, because the potatoes give it give the broth some thickness. And then we cut up sausages in ours, and we cut up onions. So he had to be responsible for doing. He's like, "Oh, I didn't know that all this goes into making green beans, Mom." I'm like, Now, when you get older, if you just want to open a can and put some butter in it, that's your choice. But you also know how to do it the way Mommy does it. Okay? Learning opportunities. Celebrate the pride within your culture and your family. Yes?
My mom has to go.
Okay. We will see you next time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Celebrate our culture and our pride. I have one student that I will never forget. She was in the 9th grade. Her sister was a 12th grader. Bye, sweetie pie. Have a good night, okay? All right. She was in the 9th grade, and sister was in the 12th grade. Sister has skated through, done well. I was working in an academy program at the time. and both of them were cadets in our program. The younger sibling, bless her heart, when mom and dad both worked, grandma would come to the parent-teacher conference. They were Latinx. Grandma did not speak that much English. I speak a little bit enough to survive in Latinx Spanish-speaking country. And as I heard, when my experience with the older sister was, she translated everything, and I would be like, oh, yes, she did. She got that point. All of the things that I needed for her to communicate to grandma was being communicated. Younger sister, on the other hand, would just make it seem like, oh, it's nothing. But she wasn't doing as well as her older sister either. And so our second parent conference, grandma sitting there, and I recorded the conference. What younger sister was telling to grandma. And I played the recording back for big sister. And I said, I just have a feeling that this is not what I said. And so big sister, at lunchtime, goes and gets her younger sister and is like hemming her up by the collar and just like, why didn't you tell grandma the truth? And she hadn't. And I, like I said, when you're doing this enough, it's things that you just pick up. And I was just like, this is, it's not feeling right. And I'm not hearing what I need to hear being translated. Long and short of it, she was, trying not to make ruffles, waves at home, because being the youngest, sometimes you get to skate on by. I had to tell her. One of the things that I discovered in that meeting was she hated speaking Spanish. And she said to me, that's the old country way. We're in America now. I'll be like, I hear you, but what makes America so rich is the fact that we have so many different cultures and language and religions and just things. And she's like, I just want to speak English and be American and just go on. I don't want to do, and then we later discovered her family would travel back to Mexico during the winter, part of the winter months, and their winter break would be longer because and so in having those conversations, she's like, I hate going back. And so I was like, let's have a conversation with parents and grandparents about what it really means to you and how is it impacting you. In the end, by the time she was a senior, she did a project that celebrated her culture. Every year at the beginning of the school year, because I had a litany of just cultures who showed up, I showed the Joy Luck Club, Mi Familia, and Soul Food, just to give us a perspective of 3 different cultures of family dynamics and how they were more alike than they were different. And we didn't just watch the movies. I made them read excerpts from the books. If it doesn't sound right, question it. If it doesn't feel right, I say check that. Because we have to be bold and courageous and not afraid that the school knows more than you. Right? And then what to look out for. I think that you all are doing those kind of things by being in spaces like this. We talked about these things as far as common terms and shared language. What does equity look like in the classroom, on the playground, right? Family engagement. How does that play out for you? Who's there and who's not? We know what our social emotional learning is. Are our schools providing culturally responsive teaching? And I can flesh this out, probably these next 3 out a little bit more. I plan on doing that in the next session. But cultural responsive teaching also lends to who's on our campuses. What does representation look like? Are our kids being exposed to a variety and different people to lead their educational experience? Parents can be involved in curriculum adoption. They need to understand standards, where to find them, right? Sometimes a lot of the things that we're looking at is very data driven, and oftentimes it's not the quantity, it's the quality, if that makes sense. The numbers don't lie as to where we are and how we're performing, but it's also the quality and the experience that impacts the student. Student agency and parent rights are like up here for me when it comes to where we are today when it comes to education. Like, if you are not allowing space for student agency to transpire on your campus and your kids don't feel like their voice matters, the school, the community, and at home, we're missing the mark. That agency is so important. And if I broke agency down a little bit more, it would be voice, when they trust their voice. 2, that they are being able to articulate what their needs are. That's what agency is, right? But take that a step further, where to help them find the resources to solve what that need is, to solve the problem. And when we give them permission to recognize their voice and then to identify what those needs are, they become leaders. And they are so more creative than we are with coming up with solutions for things that we take for granted. Student agency is super important. But similarly, parent rights. Like, you have a right to be here. And so those would be my to watch out for list, because in having a right to be here, I've also experienced parents who have experienced trauma, and that trauma sometimes spills over into a negative way that impacts their students that really shouldn't impact their student, right? And so as adults, if you have friends, other parents, I always say, like, create a circle of parents that are like-minded, or in a specific particular class, if you're going on a field trip and there are 5 other parents that are there, you know, exchange names. You might not feel comfortable the first time exchanging numbers and things like that, but at least know whose parent is who, and, you know, be able to, during pickup, be like, hey, you know, that kind of thing is super important. It creates that connection that we're all in this together. But sometimes there are parents that are out there that are just floundering and don't know where to get their student needs met, much less their own. And so then the student begins to flounder. And so, I did that. I hit the wrong button. This is where we are. Like, as a parent, we have huge responsibility in allowing the schools to borrow our babies. Because at the end of the day, I don't know a parent who doesn't want to love and equip their babies with the best of them, right? We don't all come to the playing field at the same level of competency or the same level of skill or expertise. But I don't know a parent who says, oh, I'm gonna become a parent and I don't want to love this child. I just, in my mind, I can't fathom that, right? Likewise, I don't know a person, very few and far between, in almost 20 years of teaching, I know very few and far between educators who do not want the best for their students. Now, do some educators get it wrong? Absolutely. But giving educators grace is just like the same grace we want as parents, because we have to give ourselves grace sometimes. Because what we don't know, we don't know. That's just the reality of it. But when we do know, hopefully we can create new habits and things of that nature. So I know that you're the only parent left, Miss Karen, but all of it, it sounds like all of us might be parents in here. If anything that resonates, it's just like, where are we? I sometimes still, question my journey as a parent. What are we doing? And how did this, I don't know if I even shared this last time, but my older 3 boys often check my husband and I on the way that we're raising our younger 3. They say that we're doing a horrible job because we don't spank our younger 3 children. And I laugh. My now 21-year-old, who's extremely responsible, he's working 2 jobs as a full-time college student, saves his money, doesn't come to us for a lot. And he told me the other day when the 12-year-old got a phone call home, he said, I heard that my brother got a phone call from my favorite teacher. This is the teacher that called home, that he loves, this Miss Gutierrez. I think he had a little crush on Miss Gutierrez, but He says, I heard Miss Gutierrez called home and I'm coming over there tonight and I'm gonna whoop Idris for you because I know you're not gonna do it. Son, you can't do that. I've already taken his phone and he can't play video games. That's not gonna do anything. You would have whooped our butts by now. We wouldn't have made it to the car. It's like I was a younger mother when I didn't, what I now know. First off, and I have to ask my now 21-year-old, how many whoopings do you think you got compared to your 28-year-old brother? And he's like, oh, okay. Could it possibly be that you were watching some of the things that he may have had some slip-ups that caused me to act in a way that was not the best parenting? That you said to yourself, I'm not going to do that because I don't want her response to be that. Okay, so now add in the fact that I may have come to some realizations that whooping your older two brothers as much as I did, and they didn't get a lot of whoopings, and I'm being very facetious, but I'm using the example of, right? It didn't work because you're 28. If I think back, let's think back. That oldest child, he either like was liking to bump his head and get all this negative attention from mommy and daddy. I don't think that kids, so just like I don't think that parents are parents who don't love their children, and I don't think that teachers don't go into the profession of educating and want bad for students, I also don't think that kids want the negative repercussions that comes along with bad behaviors that sometimes they make. And so all three have to figure out what's best for that child. And that's the conundrum, because it's never the same equation for any kid. And having 6 different personalities that I have in my household, it's like, whoo, I have one who will cry. And I have one who will go into that shutdown, and I'm not saying anything to anyone. I have one who will try to figure it out. I have a people pleaser. I have one who is like, nope, I'm not doing that. And very assertive, right? That's the conundrum. And we have to help them figure it out. So unless you don't have any questions, I have one last video I want to show, if we can try to pull it up on YouTube. Have we heard of the show Abbott Elementary? Mm-hmm. When it first came out, I was like, I don't want to watch nothing else about a school. I was like, no, I'm not doing that in my free time. There's one that is about parent engagement. There's 2 of them actually. Parent engagement. Abbott Elementary. Let's see what pops up. That first one right there.
One nail. Thank you. Can we talk now, please?
We could, but there isn't much more to say other than you need to talk to the parent.
Look, I understand. There just has to be another way to do this other than awkwardly talking to the parent first thing in the morning.
Well, try it this way. You could talk to your student's parent right now.
Hold on. Now, did you call her?
I did not. But when you said it was Joel, I remembered that his mother comes here every 2 weeks to get her nails done, just like I do.
Hey, Mrs. Howard.
Hello, Amber.
Aren't you my son's teacher?
Yes.
Getting your nails done. Word.
Can you give me something bold? Something that starts a conversation?
So, Amber. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we met already, but nice to meet you too.
So, your son Joel, you've been bringing him to school at 9. School starts at 8. Is there a reason for this?
Well, nosy. I start my shift at my job at 9:30. So it's easy for me to drop him off before that and go straight to work instead of going home or whatever.
Right.
Can I get some rhinestones that say I'm not afraid of awkward interactions?
Literally or metaphorically? Because I can do that design, it'll just be $50 extra.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Amber. Your son needs to be at school at 8. He's missing a lot of vital learning.
Word? I thought y'all just be playing with blocks and stuff.
No, this isn't daycare. By the time he comes in, we're already working on primary reading and math. He's always struggling to keep up.
Oh. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I would hate for him to fall behind and have to retake the grade. Now, I don't want that, but that's as much up to you as it is up to me.
I get you. I don't want him to fall behind. He's a smart kid.
Very.
Okay. I'll bring him at 8 from now on.
How easy is that?
It's kind of nice.
But not easy, right? How much time do we have? It's one on parent-teacher conference.
Is this one?
Yes.
I'm not sure why I didn't.
I know.
Hey there! Oh, hi! How you doing? You must be Mr. and Mrs. Wilkerson, right? Yeah, great. Please, take a seat.
Thanks.
Yeah, all right. So, I have heard so much about you two from Skylar.
Really? Like what?
Oh, I'm sorry, not really. That's just something I say to all the parents. I apologize for the small chairs. You know.
No, it's all right, but I bet I look ridiculous sitting in this thing.
No, stop. You look great.
You know what? I'll take it.
Here's the headline. Skylar is one cool kid.
And trust me, he gets that from his mom.
Oh, sweetie. Well, first of all, we want to thank you for teaching our son to love reading.
Yeah, he reads every night now. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, he's a smart kid, you know. The reading part was easy, okay? The math stuff, however, he's having a tougher time with, you know, especially fractions.
Right, yeah. Now that he got from me.
Wow! Yeah, I mean, you have a very infectious laugh.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So fractions, right? That's Skylar's main problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, you know what? I think he just finds math a little boring, which trust me. But he may need some additional help. You know, tutor perhaps.
I see. Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and are you available?
I mean, in what sense?
Of course, this is
Tutor our son.
It has the
No, you know, I don't see students outside of school. It's just a little rule of mine.
Seems smart. And how would we find a tutor?
Well, do you ever break the rules?
What does engagement look like? Right? And not
Depends who's
being
asking.
Well, I'm asking.
crossing the lines
Okay, then.
and all of the things, right?
I'm sorry. So yes, you are gonna tutor Skylar?
That's the point.
No, definitely not. No, but I
Okay.
I do have a list of tutors vetted by the school here. No, I mean, if you're interested.
What are the
Yeah, that'd be
resources?
great, yeah.
How
Yeah,
are we
sounds
communicating what those resources are?
Hey,
Things
I
of that
don't
nature.
see your number here.
He's not
Again,
available. You
it's
just
the
said
humor
that.
behind it. But
And you're not worried about his development or anything, right?
No. Skylar is a total sweetheart. In fact,
and that's a good question.
I don't think I've had to
Development,
punch the little guy
right?
once.
Punish? Okay. Wow. You do not strike me as the punishing type.
Well, you don't know me very well.
I think there's one
Do
more
you, Miss
point.
Okay, I'm not crazy about the whole Ms. thing. Well, anyway, thanks for meeting with us. We'll take a look at this list. Yeah, and have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy. Yeah.
Hey.
And that was, so engagement, what are we communicating to? But at the same time, are we asking questions as parents as to what that looks like in the classroom, right? What needs are being met? What is the routine in the classroom? Is super, super important. Like when they show up in the beginning of the day, can they expect this to get them started is super important. Sometimes parents have asked me, like, what time is, what time can we expect the kids to have a break or a snack? Is that okay to have in the classroom? Questions that come up, knowing what days of the week, PE, especially for elementary, what days of the week are PE, because they don't get PE every day unless it's infused. Other things, being able to know. So for my boys, for example, which I always find the strangest, the younger kids sometimes have a lunch that's later than the older kids. And part of me is like, why don't the younger kids get to go first? But then also a part of me is like, the bigger we are, the quick we need to get that refuel of. And so I always make sure that the littler ones have a snack, or that they have a little opportunity to get a bigger meal. When is the best time to talk to and reach the teacher and the staff, and knowing who the other people are on campus. I shared this last time we were here. The most important person on any school campus to know by name is the school secretary. Like, that person is golden. And the second person is the janitor. The janitor knows where everything is and who everyone is supposed to be on that campus. You will not get lost because they know, right? But also just being aware of who the principal and the vice principal are, and not being afraid of having conversations and interacting. It's just not the teacher. And I think that sometimes parents, we forget that. And even us being in the field of education, we forget that. Because I know I do. I get busy, I'm like, my current fourth grader, I don't think I know this teacher, because my older boy, and so this is now December, and he's been with her since August. And at least every other week I'm saying, what's your teacher's name again? Because I haven't met her in person. And I don't think that I know her because my other boys didn't have her. And so that memory thing is a thing. If we don't practice it because we don't make that association, we're missing an opportunity to connect. And so I have to, I got to get up there to the school. And he's my last one. And it's almost like in the back of my mind with 6 kids, it's like, I don't want to. Because that's it. And he's not struggling. He's not a behavioral problem. I don't want to. But I know I need to. And so sometimes we got to get out of our comfort zone and do some things that we know that we don't want to do. So we into session 2 and we are done. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We just put Karen to work, that's all. Karen comes and volunteers and helps with some reading groups.
Right?
And, we said, Karen, what's your